Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give everyone a quick minute to log on and get settled before we get started. So just hang in there with us for one moment. For anyone who's just joining, we're just taking a quick moment to get everyone settled, give everyone a chance to log on. I see our numbers are still going up at the bottom, so just give us 1 minute here and we'll get started. Alrighty, I think we've got a good amount of folks on. So I'm Megan Chickrell with the Executives Club of Chicago, Forums and Content Manager. I wanted to thank you all for joining us this morning for this conversation about corporate social responsibility in a pandemic, brought to you by our Corporate Social Responsibility Forum, which is chaired and sponsored by Edelman. So I'd like to kick it over to John Edelman for some introductory remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our virtual CSR forum. I'm John Edelman, Managing Director of Global Engagement and Corporate Responsibility at Edelman and Chair of the Corporate Social Responsibility Forum of the Executives Club. How visionary for the Executives Club to establish a CSR forum this year. With COVID and racial justice and equality front and center, it's clear that the S, the social component of environmental, social, and governance in CSR is equally important to every company and every community in which it operates. And to that end, we've assembled an expert panel to answer your questions and talk about how Chicago is responding to these issues. First, before we get started, let's go over some highlights about how to participate in the forum. To ask questions, click the Q&A box, ask a question using your microphone, or you can click in the chat box. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and thank you, panelists, for taking the time to share on this important issue. And now I'd like to kick it over to Daniel Diermeyer, our moderator, former provost of University of Chicago and incoming chancellor of Vanderbilt University.
Thank you, John. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us, and my particular gratitude to the panelists who will join us in the conversation this morning. I'd like to start with just brief introductions by our panelists. Ellen, would you like to start?
I thank you so much, and I'm so pleased to be here. My name is Ellen Turner. I'm the president and CEO of the William Everett Group. We are a minority and women-owned management and information technology consulting firm and a family-owned business headquartered here in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Adam, who wins the award for best Zoom background. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Heckman. I work for Microsoft Philanthropies in the US. I build partnerships with other large companies whose corporate social responsibility priorities align to Microsoft's philanthropies and priorities. And I build those corporate social responsibility partnerships around workforce development, so partnerships that are designed to help people who are the most in need acquire the skills they need to better be able to participate in the digital economy.
Thank you, Adam. Michael?
Good morning, everyone. Michael Fassner. I'm the first ever Chief Marketing Officer for the City of Chicago. Just joined Laura Lightfoot's team 3 months ago, really focusing on marketing and communication for the City of Chicago, focus on its residents, for companies, tourism, and as well attracting talent to the city. And the last 3 months, as we all know, has been quite an intense time to figure out how we do really communication in a health crisis and a business crisis, and now as well the time where we all realize that systematic inequality and racism have to be addressed, and communication plays a big role in that.
Thank you, Michael. Brian?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Brian Nash. I am the Vice President of Sustainability for Ingredion, which is a global ingredient manufacturer based or headquartered here out of Chicago. And in that role, I'm responsible for helping to set our sustainability strategy and liaising with all our various stakeholders around the world. I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you to our panelists. So let's kick it off. I'm going to have a few questions first to the panelists, and then we'll go to the audience. But feel free to submit your questions while we're having the conversation, so we can kind of use them already as we go along. So let me start with a question that's related to something that Michael said. This country is facing a health crisis of gigantic proportions, an economic crisis, and what I would say a moral crisis now, also related to racism and racial inequalities, as Michael put it. What makes this particularly difficult, of course, is that these things reinforce each other. We all know that the health crisis led, of course, to the lockdown, that led to the economic crisis. And then, of course, we also know that when you look at COVID-19, Black Chicagoans have been dying at a much higher rate compared to the rest of the city, which is just one example of the tremendous health inequities that we're all dealing with, but they are made, I think, prominent and front and center because of what we're seeing. And then, of course, everybody has been, I think, in shock by the events in the last 2 weeks and you know, the horrendous killing and the videos and the shootings and all of that. So these are tough times for all of us. And so I would like to first ask you how you, in your roles and you in your responsibilities, how your organizations have responded to these challenges and how that has changed your view of corporate social responsibility, if at all. I'm going to start with Adam, and then I'm going to go to Ellen.
I certainly think it put the responsibility in corporate social responsibility. You know, the equity issue, the justice issue, the economic issue, the skills and employability issue, and the health issue, as you alluded to, they're all intertwined. And I think that one of the things that we've also seen is that there's no such thing as strictly local anymore. And for that matter, strictly global anymore. What happens in Minnesota, it influences what happens in Chicago and in other parts of the world, and vice versa. So the term, you know, think globally, act locally, it still has a place, but so does the responsibility to think and act globally when you're able to. And I think corporate America has that kind of responsibility. I know that in our company, we know from an economic standpoint that we're going to be responsible for some of the shifts in economic shifts, in technology shifts. So we know that there's going to be a whole new set of skills that need to be equitably distributed, as well as access to technology that needs to be equitably distributed. Otherwise, in this next transformation, economic transformation, you're going to see the same people get left behind. You're going to see the same people get neglected. You got one chance to get this right, and it's the responsibility of the companies like ours who are building this stuff to make sure that the equity happens.
Thank you very much, Adam. Ellen?
So as I mentioned in the opening, we are a minority and women-owned firm. The mission, one of the missions of our organization is to make sure that we encourage people in our community, one, to come work for companies that they're exposed to consulting, but we also are trying to impact our own economic development. I just feel at the end of the day, you know, a lot of these issues are about, you know, education, employment, awareness. And so a lot about the mission of our company won't change in terms of what we're trying to do to impact the world around us. But what we are trying to do also, what we will be doing now, even more so, is working with our tier 1 partners to help them, build effective diversity and outreach programs that are very impactful, and just forgive me for saying this, but we hear, there's a lot of lip service about we have this diversity program and we want to do X, Y, and Z. And I say that because I've talked to many companies who say they want to include this, but then at the end of the day, there's, you've got these great CEOs and diversity inclusion officers, but it's not going down to the decision makers who can make an impact. And so I think we're just going to continue our work to help organizations actually make that a reality now. People have to have jobs, and we have to help these at-risk communities. And at the end of the day, if we do that, then we're helping ourselves, right? We can decrease amount of some of the unrest we've seen here lately. So that's gonna, be a big change for us to really try to help our partners make these things more of a reality instead of just talk, right? So.
Brian, let me follow up on some of the things that Ellen has talked about. Ingredion, has been active in, community aspects, corporate social responsibility in the sustainability space. But it seems like that these 3 crises all going at the same time have created a sense of urgency, and an urgency not only to talk about these issues and to have programs, but really an urgency for action and impact. How is your thinking and the thinking and Ingredion thinking has been changing as a consequence of what we have been going through?
Yeah, certainly early on in the pandemic, I think we saw, an immediate shift away from the environmental aspect of sustainability onto the social aspect. And that's only continued to heighten, as we've gone from pandemic to economic crisis to racial turmoil. And so I think aside from that shift to put a stronger focus on social than maybe has been there before, I think we're also seeing a shift, like you mentioned, to responsibility. So I think in the large part, sustainability has gone from a do no harm or don't do bad things to really showing that you're trying to make an impact. So how are you delivering? How are you making your communities better? And I think at the heart of that are going to be a few things like transparency. I think we're going to see a greater demand for transparency from companies and organizations. And I think we're going to see on top of that transparency, then also better linkage to the needs of society. So we're already seeing a lot of companies adopt things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals as foundations for their sustainability work. But I think demonstrating how what we do as an organization or as a company is helping to deliver on the needs of society is going to become of increasing importance as well.
Thank you, Brian. Michael, let me talk to the role of government here, local government, just particularly city government. So obviously this has been a tremendous challenge for any community in this country and around the world. So tell us a little bit about how the city of Chicago is thinking about this. And maybe you can also talk to opportunities for partnership with businesses in order to address these challenges.
I think in most conversations that the mayor and her team and I have with corporate leaders, we're trying to stress that especially the C-suite, that companies have to rethink of how they think about stakeholders. Traditionally, we always thought about shareholders, employees or freelancers, and then third customers. We think community is your 4th key stakeholder that you have to think about, that you have to engage, that you have to listen to. And I think right now, this is a reckoning, I think, for all the corporate leaders that we try to help. How can you have listening sessions with communities? Because long term, if we don't address the systematic issues in our community, you as a business, you will not be successful. We have seen this with the pandemic and as well with the killing of George Floyd. So I think we really try to help the corporate leaders to understand that. I think that's why corporate social responsibility becomes really one of the key agenda items for any C-suite leader, I think, in Chicago. And I think that the mayor is trying, I think, to foster these conversations and be very honest and transparent, where we sometimes leaders fail in government, but we're also where we have to call out things that are just not right. And I think they were probably hidden a little bit because a lot of companies did really well and didn't feel like this is core part of their daily work.
So I think one thing that we have seen is that, especially when the pandemic started, but I think that has continued, we've seen a lot of companies step up and really support their community in quite remarkable ways. Sometimes utilizing what they have been doing anyway, but with a level of intensity that would benefit the community. In other cases, redirecting some of their capabilities towards making an impact on the lives of people. I mean, 2 examples, I think along those lines. Obviously, everybody that's working in healthcare right now is front and center on that. And the decision by Gilead, to kind of make their drug available at no cost first, and then at lower cost. And then on the other hand, where capabilities have been repurposed, the use of car companies to build ventilators rather than cars, I think are examples of both the innovation and of the commitment of companies to have an impact during these difficult times. On the other hand, companies also facing tough times themselves. We all know that the economic pressures have led to the need for layoffs, furloughs, shutting down or closing down of factories or production facilities. And the business needs, the urgent business needs, frankly, to just survive in this environment sometimes seem at odds with what is required and expected of companies during this time. How do we manage these tensions? How do we think about this? On the one hand, the desire to be part of the effort to have a positive impact on community. On the other hand, the tough business needs to just make sure that we're gonna make it as a business during these difficult times. Let me start with Brian, and then I'm gonna go to Adam and then to Alan.
Yeah, I think one of my sustainability professors said something one time that always stuck with me, and I've used this example more times than I can count. He said that sustainability is like a metal sphere with pins going all the way through it. And those pins might represent social or economic on one side, and they might represent environment or profit. So he said that it's really a balance, right? That a lot of people think that there's perfection where you push all the pins in and everything works perfect. And sometimes that happens, but usually it doesn't. And so it's about finding the right balance for the right situation. Company is not going to say, here's where I set my pins, and this is the scenario for everything. Every different opportunity that you encounter is going to look different. And so similarly in this pandemic, we've had to consider where do those pins go, right? What's the right balance? And there have been discussions around the economics versus, impact to our community and how do we support. So I think it's a great opportunity for companies to show how they lead through a crisis. I think it's fairly easy to show how you lead when everything's going great and you're printing money but when everything goes wrong, it's a great opportunity to show how you have leadership. And so we've looked at right away. We started looking at existing relationships we have. We've worked with the Global Food Banking Network, which is also headquartered out of Chicago for a long time now, and we instantly reached out to them and said, what do you need? What can we do to be helpful? Understanding that our traditional type of volunteerism that we've engaged with them on, wasn't really viable at the start of the pandemic. And they said, what we need is money. The normal avenues of getting food at discounted cost and everything have dried up, and we really need money. And so we were able to support them in providing more than 1 million meals out to food banks globally, which I think was fantastic. But then also looking at some of the trade-offs, right? So to have money to do that in a time where economics are strained, we look at the fact that, okay, well, we now have a lot of employees that were traveling that aren't traveling anymore, and so we're able to kind of reallocate budgets and things like that to more local needs. And so I would say that it really is about assessing priorities and what you can do and where there can be a little give in one place so that you can provide more benefit in another.
Thank you, Brian. Adam, let me ask a little bit on that. I want to follow up a little bit on something that Brian said and just kind of sharpen this a little bit. The tech industry has been, at least from most businesses, largely isolated from the economic impact. Actually, has been thriving in many cases. So there may not be the immediate need to deal with layoffs and furloughs, but what is a role that tech can play to kind of lessen the social impact of the economic crisis, maybe with respect to suppliers or community engagement or something along those lines?
Well, first, let me echo something that Brian said about employee engagement. It's really hard to start your employee engagement or your volunteerism opportunity during a crisis. I mean, if it takes a crisis and you start your volunteerism and your employee engagement, whatever it takes, great. But companies have to understand that there are issues that hit the company values, and if you give the employees the support to work towards those values, but also not isolate them from their individual values with your employee engagement program, that's great. Daniel, you had mentioned the tech industry and what we can do. All of these issues that we had just talked about, the COVID crisis, the equity crisis, the jobs crisis, the economic crisis, as I mentioned before, they're all intertwined, and tech companies are in a unique position. You're right, the tech industry didn't have to have the layoffs and the furloughs that other industries have experienced. I think that tech companies have to be responsible for looking for the long term. There's a lot of things that tech can do. We have to think about what tech should do. So tech can work in a few different ways. It can create gaps, or it can fill those gaps. And as a company, you have to think long and hard about what your values are and where you're going to take that technology. That's the technology piece of it. Then there's the employee piece of it, and the employee engagement piece. Microsoft, we started out prior to COVID with a really solid employee engagement program and momentum, where community engagement and support was just part of the culture, and the company was able to build programs around that. So when COVID hit, we had a great base to start from, and we turned out employee giving and employee engagement. We turned it on basically in an off period. We have this period of time where we have a giving campaign for funding. We have a week where people spend the week working on issues outside of their specific job, et cetera. We were able to just turn that on, and practically overnight, our employees donated tens of millions of dollars to frontline responders, to thousands of hours, help nonprofits flip into a virtual model. We got employees donating their own hardware devices to give to hospitals like Sturgeon or Cook County. I'm not sure we could have done that if we had started our employee engagement platform as a response to COVID. You had to have that as a backdrop.
Thank you.
If I might jump in.
Sure, please.
I think the fundamental questions for all corporate leaders are, do companies own to address and solve inequality and systematic racism or not? And that is, I think, and I'm not sure if all corporate leaders, we own as well solving for that. We say, no, this is, we will help and support, but government has to take the lead role in that. That's for me, I think, that the fundamental question that I think we should all ask our leaders. And if I would be still in the private sector, I would ask my leaders as well, do they own the solution for inequality and systematic racism or not?
And if I could further that, because again, I have watched this whole debate and discussion my entire professional career, and talking about it, all these feel-good conversations, you all hold all these networking things to invite us into your tier 1 companies to talk about it. There has to be transparency. you have to hold accountable the people who are the decision makers as to whether they did something, not just talked about it, but where are the facts? How has your giving, your inclusion increased in the African American and Latinx communities? Year over year, how has it changed? You know, maybe you can make sure that the decision makers, as part of their performance evaluations, that there is accountability there. So we don't want to have any more fairs about how you want to help us. Let's see the actual action.
Ellen,
That's what we need to see.
Ellen, you're spot on that, and I think that it gets accentuated when you're in the tech industry. For a lot of reasons. We have last year we have a team called the Criminal Justice Reform Team that invests in partnerships and programs to work on driving reforms, and it focuses on policing. This was started back in 2019. When you have tech companies that know how to take data and technology and turn that into action that Ellen was speaking of, it's really powerful.
Yeah, it's all about data, facts.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, save the money for the fair and put it into actual projects, contracts, and that will eventually help the bottom line of the communities getting better. People need jobs. We bring people into our corporations and mentorships and internships, first of all, just to even, you know, in some communities, they've never even heard of a consulting. You know, so we're doing awareness, but, you know, you have to have some real action.
So
and you think we're watching what you do. So it's important that there's real action. So
I want to follow up on this theme a little bit, and I want to make a distinction, and I'd like to see how you respond to that. So I think when the way Michael said it, you know, is that the real question is, and Ellen echoed it and sharpened it, I think, it's like, you know, the real question is, you know, what's the action and what's the impact? And do you take this on as your responsibility, and then you're committed to action and hold yourself accountable whether you made a difference or not? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I think it captured it to some extent. So I think we can think about this in two different spheres. So the first sphere, I would say, is how we run our business. So those are diversity and inclusion, hiring, development of people, but then you can also go beyond that. How do you select your suppliers? You know, how do you work with them? Do you make sure that you have a diverse supplier base? And this is, I think, is very important. At the University of Chicago, we have been super committed to that. Is that when you think about the diverse supplier base, that it includes professional services, very importantly. And secondly, that when you get, you know, a big law firm and they send their team, are they sending a diverse team? Yes. And that those are things that if you have, if you're a big business or a big organization, you can drive change not only to what you do, but how you deal with suppliers as well. But then there's another bigger sphere, and Adam was talking about it, which is, I think, you know, the question of, do you take now also positions on policy or be involved in that, whether that's police reform or, you know, healthcare or a whole variety. And I think one of the things that I find fascinating, I'd love to get your response to that, and I think it's just going to be further accelerated, is if you look back, I would say, you know, 6 to 9 months ago, CEOs have been much more willing to take positions on what you could call controversial issues. Immigration, gun control, these are just a couple of examples. And I don't think we would have seen this 10, 15 years ago. I think CEOs and businesses were much more cautious, but they have been willing to kind of stake a claim, not only how they run their business, but to have an impact on policy. So I'd love to get is that changing, and how do we think about these different spheres? Ellen, I'm going to start with you and then go to Michael.
I'm so glad you brought that other really important point, is also looking internally and making sure that your policies, also internal policies, reflect those changes. that the makeup of the people that are in senior management and on your boards or reflect the community. And again, sometimes without us even intending to do this, we tend to hire just the people we know and the folks that, we're familiar with, and we're not intending to be discriminative. We just, know the people we know. And I was so happy I got a call from a tier 1 company the other day who said, we are doing this internally now because we need to make sure that when we hire younger consultants of color, that they see people in management that look like them, right? And so, I just think it's so important that you have those people there because they will help you formulate the right policies to change within, and that will then reflect, throughout what you do in terms of giving in the community and everything. You have to have those people at the table because you're not going to, I think, always properly think about all the issues that are facing Latinx and African American communities in the way that someone of color that will, and they will help you both internally and externally. So I think it's so important that that has to happen.
Michael?
Yeah, I think to your question, if you studied the Edelman Trust Index over the last couple of years, you have seen a declining trust in government, primarily driven by a complete lack of leadership in Washington, and as well a declining trust in media. And I think you have a rising trust in corporate leaders. Interesting enough, I think especially the younger employees expect from the C-suite to take not political party positions, but policy positions. Gay rights, it's not a political issue, it's a human rights issue. Police behavior is a human rights issue. And I think employees nowadays expect from their leaders to take positions on that. If not, the most talented and all the young folks will leave that particular company. And if you look at the data, that shows. So I see a shift, and I think it's necessary because progress will not only driven by the mayor and by the city. We cannot do this alone. We need corporate partners. We don't have to agree on everything, but certain things I think should be in this country, I think are not for discussion. That if it's police treatment, if it's racial equality, if it's gay rights, that these corporate leaders need to stand up and voice them.
Thank you, Michael. Brian?
Yeah, Ellen mentioned diverse viewpoints, and I couldn't agree more. I think this is at the heart of sustainability or CSR, particularly because this is an area where there are lots of different programs, lots of different activities. I know as a supplier to some of the world's largest food and beverage companies, we get asked to do variations of the same thing, and diversity of suppliers. We get multiple requests and different types of programs that our customers would like us to comply with. And so sometimes makes it challenging to implement what everybody's looking for. But I think the key is that we don't look to solve these problems internally, that we make sure that we have a diverse representation when we try to solve the problems, whether that's gender or racial or just stakeholder diversity. We look at external tools that are available so that when we're making decisions, it's based on some recognized standard. And then we have transparency around it. We make sure that our stakeholders know why we've made these decisions, why we've selected these tools or these standards, and tell them how we're performing. I mean, in the world of sustainability, it certainly looks a lot more trustworthy to tell somebody that you're, at 78% of the way to implementing a program than to say you're at 100% across the board for everything. And I don't think our investors or our stakeholders or our customers are expecting perfection. I think they're expecting us to do something. And I think they're expecting us to be honest about where we've had successes and where we've had hurdles and what we're going to do to try to make it better, tomorrow.
Thank you. Adam, I want to turn to you. I want to add one little wrinkle to that, if you want to address that as well.
Yeah, sure. these are complex societal issues, and you're right. They require policy frameworks and agendas designed to drive community level and broad scale reforms. And I also think that, Daniel, you're right that you are starting to see corporate America speak out on these things. And Microsoft will continue to support this important work. As Michael said, no one sector can do this alone. Government can't do this alone. Corporate America can't do this alone. Civil society can't do this alone. We believe that partnership is essential to driving meaningful progress. And to Ellen's point, these are all words until you actually do it. And so we're expanding our partnership network and learning from these organizations, as well as continuing to gather input from our employees, from community leaders, from government leaders. You have to learn, evolve, and share. Learn, evolve, and share. Learn, evolve, and share. And to Ellen's point is, when corporate leaders say they're going to do something, you have to hold them accountable to it. And how do you hold them accountable to it? Well, that requires a level of transparency from those companies that many companies may feel uncomfortable being as transparent about their progress or their lack of progress year over year on some of these issues. So that's
So let me ask a question, and this is my last question before we turn to the Q&A. So feel free to send in your questions, and anyone who would love to jump in, just jump in. So I think one of the things that is particularly challenging when you are doing CSR work is, where do you engage and where do you not engage? And there are a couple of forces that drive that. One of them are just kind of the urgency of the issue that society is dealing with right now. And you may just be asked to take a position or have a response to that, whether you like to or not. And then there's another dimension is, do I have how is this related to my business? Do I have a competency? Do I have actually something to say? Is there something that I should talk about? And everybody can talk about diversity and inclusion in the workforce. But for example, do I want to comment on a specific policy issue? May just be a question of what business I'm in. So give me a sense for how you are thinking about where to engage and where not to engage. Adam, you want to go first? I feel you're reaching for the unmute button. So go ahead.
Wow, Vanderbilt is getting a really prescient guy. So you're right, there is the bottom line piece of where you invest, but then there's also the responsibility and corporate social responsibility. So, I'm focused on workforce development issues. Why am I focused on workforce development issues? Because there's going to be changes in technology that are going to impact the economy, and that those technology changes are happening very swiftly, and we have a very tight window to make sure that those changes in terms of filling skills demand happen inclusively and happen equitably. So that's the responsibility of corporate social responsibility. So that's where we choose to put one of our philanthropic priorities. The other place that we put it is, in Brian's space around sustainability. We took a look at what our own carbon footprint was. We decided that it wasn't good enough to get to zero carbon, to a neutral carbon footprint standpoint. We decided that we have the responsibility to go back to 1975 in our finding and take out all the carbon that we've ever put into the world. So that's how we think about it.
Brian, Allen, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think in terms of where do we look to engage and how do we make that selection? I think there's a sweet spot when I'm looking at programs, right? So I think there used to be this idea that sustainability needed to be altruistic, and that's not the case. If your programs aren't delivering a value in some way to the company, then they're probably under scrutiny anytime that economics become a little tight. So I think that I completely agree with Adam that there is a responsibility of companies to look at things that maybe don't have a direct link to the business and push for change in communities. But I also think that it's the responsibility of CSR leaders and other people in the organization to look and see how we can leverage the things that we're doing to be of benefit to the business. And one of the things that I'll bring up as an example, I think that maybe will help solidify this, is we were looking at women empowerment in our agricultural supply chain in Pakistan. We started looking at it because we thought it was the right thing to do. We also found that a couple of large customers of ours in the food and beverage industry were also looking at it. And so now we are co-funding a program to drive a lot more change a lot faster, and doing this with large customers that I think is seen as a satisfier in terms of what we provide as a supplier. So I think there's always that challenge to be responsible and then also connect that back to value for the business. And that's what we look to do. We don't make every decision based on whether or not we can show an exact link to value to the company, but it's certainly something that we try to do as we leverage other partners in our supply chain in this journey.
Alan?
As a small business owner, as you can imagine, we are limited in how much we can give in actual corporate dollars. And so we started thinking, okay, what can we do? How can we help? And we engaged a corporate giving program where we asked everyone in our company to get engaged. So that meant instead of us just writing checks, we looked at what programs, what charitable organizations our employees were invested in. And it was amazing the things that people came up. I found out things about people that work for me I had no idea. I have an employee who has a child that has a chronic heart problem. I have a son who had, chronic heart issues. People who were dealing with domestic violence, working with juvenile centers and that sort of thing. So our work is more around doing sometimes than just giving. And it doesn't necessarily, and it lets us, help in a broader way, because people are actually across the company engaged in real, volunteerism and that sort of thing. And so while, like I said, we can't necessarily always give dollars, but we have a lot of people who give a lot of their time, and so that we don't have to make that trade-off, or because you do always have to look at the bottom line. We are a for-profit corporation, but we give more around volunteerism, and we are always focused on communities that are at risk in the African American and Latinx communities, because at the end of the day, if we can help them with education, mental health, those types of issues, employment, then we think that's the core and the key for us improving the environments and the communities where we work. So that's how we do it.
Thank you, Alan. I have a question from Michael that's actually connected to one of the questions from the audience already. So Michael, as you're thinking about the role of government, particularly local government, in pushing, incentivizing, holding the private sector accountable, how do you think about that role, particularly as you're thinking about issues related to racial justice and the inequities that we've been talking about?
Very good question. I think that the one key focus we have, and some of you might know the initiative Invest in Southwest. Historically, we have spent too much focus, time, and money on downtown. We really have to look at how can we get all the corporate presence in all 77 neighborhoods. So we identified 10 neighborhoods, or corridors we call them, on the south and west side of Chicago. We're investing to make the front door of this neighborhood a lot of investment in. We're looking right now for corporate partners who join us in making sure we're lifting and elevating up these 10 neighborhoods. I mean, Starbucks has been heavily involved, BMO Harris already And we need companies because ultimately I believe physical presence in certain neighborhoods and all neighborhoods, it matters. It makes a difference because you bring different talent in, you bring your investment in. So this is the key thing, is because historically, I think in Chicago, if you look at any transformation the city has gone through, was only focused on the center at the time of the history where Chicago was in. And we really have, and the one thing COVID-19 could be, this as an opportunity, because people might want less be in dense spaces. We have to use not that our 77 neighborhoods as an advantage. You can have a second headquarters, second office somewhere at the south or west side, and not in such a dense area than just downtown.
Thank you, Michael. Another question from the audience. This is particularly for Michael, for Adam and Brian. So I'm going to start with Adam and then I'm going to ask Brian. Is, many of the issues that we've been talking about suggest a partnership between those people in the company that have responsibility for corporate social responsibility, sustainability, and people that work in the diversity and inclusion space. So how are you thinking about those partnerships?
Yeah, you don't really disassociate. You don't really disassociate them. Look, the people who are working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion departments, they're working with not just CSR and not just HR. They're working with all areas of the business. They're working with the leadership. They're working with the managers. They're working with training. They're working, as you pointed out, in procurement. So CSR is no different. CSR has a limited amount of funding and resources to invest. And so we've got to make sure that we're investing it in the right place. And what the DE&I lens reminds us is that when you're looking at who you're going to partner with, you have to look at two things. You have to look at both who they are and what they do. Not what they're committed to, but what they actually do. So DE&I, they're not a silo. They don't stay in one place. They permeate the business.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I would agree with what Adam said. I mean, Ingredion was very fortunate in that earlier this year, we launched our new 2030 sustainability strategy, and DEI is one of the components of that strategy. And so we felt it was really important to make sure that we were linking CSR and DEI very closely. And we've seen increased interest from our stakeholders and the investment community to do so. So for us, that link got a lot stronger this year. So we've got representatives that sit on our Global Sustainability Council. I sit on our Global DEI Council. And I think that's how we do it, right? We start to collaborate and make sure that as we set the strategies for both groups, that they're well integrated with one another.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. They all point to the same underlying issue, which is the issue of partnerships. So we talked a lot about the role of companies in having a social impact, but of course you can expand and enhance your impact to partnering, whether that is with other philanthropic entities, whether that's with nonprofits, civic societies, universities, I think, can play an important role of that. The academic medical centers, of course, were around the country the backbone of the COVID-19 response in many communities. How are you thinking about how do we catalyze, facilitate these types of partnerships? I'm going to start with Michael and then Ellen.
I mean, I don't know if we facilitate that much. I mean, there's so many great organizations. Let's say Chicago, and I think if it's as a company or as an individual, because I see a question, how can I get involved? My recommendation is always very pragmatic. Join a board. Join a board that's close to you. Join Adam and I on the Chicago Public Library Foundation board. Join a board. Get involved. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we become too theoretical. I believe that I'm hopeful for what I've seen the last couple of weeks, the redefinition of public service. Public service doesn't mean you get a paycheck from the government. We all, when we at our best, we are public servant. And I think I see people stepping up, young folks stepping up, get involved, join someone. That's the best way of a partnership, because it's a partnership between yourself and your community.
Wonderful. Ellen?
Yeah, I totally agree with Michael. For the past 20 plus years, I've sat on a number of boards. Most of those years were set on boards in Chicago's Austin community. And if you're not familiar with it, it is one of the largest neighborhoods in Chicago, but it's also one of the poorest. It has the worst crime, worst education system. It is a really tough environment. I sat on the Loretto board, hospital board there, and also Circle Urban Ministries board for 7 years. I was the chairman of the board. And even as an African-American person who thought I was woke and really understood what was going on in these communities, I didn't have a clue what was really going on until I had to go out in that community, you know, for these board meetings and to work with the people in the community and really understand their pain and what things are important to them. And I think it's easy to sit, you know, I've actually gotten off of boards where everybody was sitting in these beautiful luxury executive suite meetings and never talking to the actual people that they were trying to help. And when I went out there, the years I spent out there, and even going out there, right, is a measure of courage because these neighborhoods in Inglewood and Austin can be pretty rough. I think that is a way to truly partner and really understand the needs of the community. And it doesn't always have to be about writing checks. It's about volunteerism, getting out there, we bring people into even our small company downtown in Chicago. We bring those young people into our company so they can see other minorities in positions of power and who are educated so that they can see real role models, not just the ones that are basketball players. And we call them real role models, the real models, the people they can see every day. So I think that's a great way to partner.
Wonderful. So we are almost out of time, but I'd like to ask each one of you, and I'm going to start with Ellen, to think about, tell us one thing that you were particularly proud of during the last few months, that either you or your company, they can be big or small. Ellen.
Yeah, I am so proud of my company. We've done, like I said, a lot of corporate giving and volunteerism, but we ended up needing help. Our employees needed help. I needed help. I was so immensely sad and confused when this whole shelter in happened, and I had clients calling, canceling our project, and you know, I had to furlough employees. I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to my employees who were crying, suffering from PTSD, suffering from all sorts of issues. And I was so proud of my employees, my senior managers who called to check on me and gave me ideas about, you know, we do a lot of organizational change management at our company. Those folks called me and said, hey, here's what we need to do to help our people. And, you know, we had prayer sessions on Monday. We had workout days on Wednesdays. We had happy hour on Friday. I was so proud of the people in my company who helped me help us get through the crisis. So it was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Michael?
I mean, I have the pleasure and the 24/7 opportunity to see, I think, one of the greatest political leader right now in the space, our mayor, Lori Lightfoot,
Yes.
dealing with a crisis. And what I'm always every day stunned by and impressed, and she said it yesterday in a press conference about some of the police behavior, you know, she has a lot of reasons to be angry, a lot of reasons, and how she uses that anger and uses the positive force to try to drive change. I think to see this on a daily basis, I think it's inspiring. And I think we all have our own issues and challenges and angers. I think to change that negative energy into something positive, I think that's inspiring.
Thank you, Michael. Adam?
I would say that if for my own let me start with my own organization. I've been with Microsoft now it's almost 29 years. And the reason that I stay is because of our employees. It's our mission, it's our values, but it's at the end of the day, it's our employees. I'm proud of the way our employees have supported one another. I'm proud of the way our company has supported the employees. and how we've all gotten together to support our communities, and especially the way we use our intellectual horsepower and our resources to start tackling the issues with what we're good at. And just a real quick shout out to the city of Chicago. I'll echo Michael. In addition to a 29-year veteran of Microsoft, I'm also a lifelong Chicagoan. I'm proud of Chicago. We don't always get it right, but our leadership, we learn. We think, we listen, we reflect, and we lead. And so I'm proud of my community.
Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, I think the pandemic and everything that's happened since has really been an opportunity to show some of the creativity and compassion that human beings are capable of. And I'm really proud that in our organization, our CEO has really been the leader of that. I mean, instantly after George Floyd, he put out an email to all employees indicating, you know, what we stand for as a company and what we believe in and our obligations, you know, inside and outside the company to lead in this space, and then follow that up, you know, within a week by having a town hall. And so I'm really proud that some of this crisis has brought out the best and shown, you know, what kind of leadership we have in the company and then elsewhere, you know, in our communities. But I've been really moved by some of the things I've seen coming out of our employees and our leadership.
Thank you, Brian. So let me just say one final word. First of all, I want to thank the panelists for a really engaging, inspiring conversation. And I think one of the things that we've seen is, as difficult as the current moment is, it's also an opportunity for us to step up and have a positive impact on our organization and on the community. And so with all the difficulty, we can make this our proudest moments, that we can look back 20, 30 years from now and have said we did the right thing. I want to thank all of you, and I'm going to hand it over back to John.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning, everyone. What a great discussion we just had. How inspiring. Please join me in welcoming and thanking everybody with a virtual round of applause. So what an amazing, inspiring session, and some key takeaways that we learned were that there's a new R in CSR, all about the emphasis on responsibility. Another important aspect is that COVID, equity, the economy, and jobs issues are intertwined. Every organizations need to assess what actions, what impacts they'll take. They need to have a balanced approach in which you learn, involve, and share, and key aspects of our transparency, accountability, actions that deliver value to the company, partnerships, taking positions on policy, and better linking to the needs of society. We hope you found this information very helpful to carry on through the rest of your day. Keep an eye on the Executives Club website for more upcoming virtual programs. In particular, we hope you can join Monday for a conversation with Jamel Cole, CEO and founder of My Block, My Hood, and My City. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and thanks again for joining us on this important conversation. Take care. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you.